In 1843, wanting to bring up the spirit of Christmas cheer and to have the welfare of the poor looked after in a better manner, Charles Dickens wrote a novella about a miser named Scrooge, who dislikes Christmas and any kind of charity or cheer, but after the encounter with three spirits who show him the error of his ways, becomes a very generous fellow, bellowing with Christmas cheer. It's a story of redemption, which puts a strong emphasis on kindness, generosity, and Christmas as a holiday that embodies those traits. A Christmas Carol had a monumental impact, reinvigorating a holiday which in the UK was waning in popularity ever since the Puritans briefly banned it in the 17th century. The novella became a phenomenon, with it being adapted into plays, musicals, radio broadcasts, and most notably film. There have been Christmas Carol adaptations since the birth of film, some of which have become lost. Some of the more notable versions are the 1938 version, the 1951 version, the 1970 musical, the Patrick Stewart one in the 90s, the Muppets musical, and the Robert Zemeckis motion-captured one in 2009. There were many adaptations of this tale, and there will continue to be, as it's such a classic and effective story that moves you. But out of all of those adaptations, the one that's my favorite didn't even get a theatrical release in the US. It was a television special on CBS, but despite being a TV movie, it stands out among the rest. And is not just a good TV movie, it's a good movie. The movie is quite similar to the novella. It adds a little bit in certain scenes, but doesn't change much, which is a large part of why it's good. Some scenes were added and some cut out, but it didn't go overboard. One of the scenes being a scene where some items are being sold off, where in the novella, 3 people are negotiating with the buyer, whereas in the movie it's 1. Which shortens the scene and still effectively gets its point across. The spirit of the ghost of Christmas past, instead of being a child looking like a grown man at the same time, is a woman. The Scrooge's father is added as a character, who even though is bringing Scrooge home from boarding school, is only letting him stay for 3 days, before he is to start an apprenticeship. This gives a little more background to the father, who was just briefly mentioned in the book, and shows the coldness Scrooge received growing up. They also added the fact that his mother died while giving birth to him, giving him a more tragic backstory. Scrooge also argues with the spirits more, but it isn't annoying. There is an added scene of an unfortunate family living under the bridge, which also gives a little insight to how the especially downtrodden are, not just Cratchit's family. Ultimately, the changes don't feel out of place or unnecessary. The writer surgically added scenes that fit, while also leaving a lot of it unchanged, knowing that there really isn't much to change. What especially makes this film stand out is the creepiness achieved through makeup and special effects. Marley's ghost creeps you out, and the ghost of Christmas present intimidates you with his towering presence. And these kids in this scene, and I don't even need to explain the ghost of Christmas yet to come. What this film also does well is the Cratchit family, and more specifically Tiny Tim, who looks actually ill, and you are legitimately concerned for him. And I don't think the makeup people did much more than give him raccoon eyes, but looking at this kid, you know he is sick. Compare this with the 1951 version, where he looks pretty normal, just has a bad leg. Of course, the lighting and cinematography are well done as well, especially near the end when he encounters the last spirit. You can tell a lot of thought was put into the shots. And there was even some decent blocking. It didn't feel overly generic and static, as a lot of TV films tend to be. The set design and location made it feel like you were in Victorian England, with them shooting it in the town of Shrewsbury. They made ample use of the location with many scenes outside, immersing you in this atmosphere. The cast is headlined by George C. Scott, who had a lengthy and illustrious career, appearing in movies such as Dr. Strangelove, Patton, and The Hustler. His performance as Scrooge balances itself out as not being overly dramatic, nor is it too undertoned. He is shrewd and mean to everyone from his employee Bob Cratchit, his nephew, and even some charitable solicitors. But he doesn't overdo it, which in a role like Scrooge would be very easy to do. Nor does he underdo it to the point of it being boring. He does it in a way that makes you think it could be a real person you would meet, but not one you'd really like, but someone you'd remember. Scott brings his charm that you see from him in all of his films. There are other notable cast members like Roger Rees, David Warner, Susanna York, Edward Woodward, Michael Carter, and Lucy Gutteridge. If you look into their other roles, you'll see movies like Titanic, Star Wars, Wicker Man, and even Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties. The film is directed by Clive Donner, who came into prominence in the 60s with the British New Wave, but ultimately had a career that slowly deflated in later years, and he would transition more and more to television movies. He even directed a TV version of Oliver Twist in 1982, which also starred Scott. He was a director who showed himself to be competent in the 60s with films like The Caretaker, but later in his career failed to get the same acclaim. One of his more infamous movies was The Nude Bomb, a movie based off the show Get Smart, but it was considered terrible and was even nominated for a Raspberry. He was also the editor of the 1951 Scrooge, so the tale had been in his mind for a while. Christmas Carol's cinematographer was Tony Imme, who did cinematography for both film and TV for many years. Some highlights being a Ken Loach teleplay and Firebirds, a movie with Nicolas Cage and Tommy Lee Jones. The writer Roger O. Herson wrote a few movies in the 70s and was primarily a Broadway writer. The production design was Roger Murray Leach, who did such movies as A Fish Called Wanda and Local Hero. None of these people were ones that became household names. They all did modestly well in their fields, but I don't think we would hear their names in conversations when talking about the best in their fields. But when they all came together, they made something special out of a TV movie. And Donner did work with Scott on Oliver Twist, but it comparatively gets no attention. Lightning struck when making this film, and it wasn't something that could be replicated. It was a combination of well-experienced people coming together with a good script that had an effective leading man, with supporting actors who were also effective, and supported by experienced direction, cinematography, strong makeup, special effects, and production design. This crew really pulled their weight. They were like the 2002 Oakland Athletics, where you have a well-balanced team that isn't very flashy, but they still get results. The film was a surprise to me. I was just casually looking for something to watch on Tubi, and this popped up. I decided to give it a watch, and was pleasantly surprised. I think it's one of the more truer adaptations. I know the 1951 version is considered the best, but I thought in terms of simplicity, good visual effects, and being more faithful to the book, this one does it better. I mean, how can the 1951 version even compare? Scrooge doesn't learn it's Christmas Day from the boy outside of the window, instead his maid. That's the most iconic scene from A Christmas Carol, and they changed it. Plus, this foreshadowing isn't subtle at all.
You must live forever, fan.
As for the musicals, they aren't my cup of tea. And as for the Zemeckis motion capture one, it's creepy, but not in a good way like the 1984 version is. So give it a watch. It's up on YouTube. Bye bye.